Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hello everyone, my name is Siti Muhibbatul. Today we are going to discuss about language change. But firstly, I would like to introduce Group A from 5F English Education Department, University of Singapore Bahasa Karawang. Language change, which consists of explanation of variation and change, will be explained by me. And how do language change spread will be explained by my friend Dedeh, and also reason for language change will be explained by my friend Aulia. But before discussing what language change, I want to explain about what is sociolinguistic. Sociolinguistic is the study of the relationship between language and society. Sociolinguistic are interested how we speak differently in a very social context, and how we may also use specific function of language to convey social meaning or aspect of our identity. Now, let's discuss about language change. Language change is a process in which, as a result of evolving needs, language features such as phonetic, lexic, syntax, and semantic vary. As a language used by many people around the world, from the Old English period until now, English has experienced a number of interesting changes. The English phrases that were considered basic and colloquial 100 years ago might seem odd to today's generations. Language is not only seen as language in sociolinguistics, but it can become contact, interaction, and use in kinds of moment in human beings living in society. According to Dinila Haria, 2016, language can change and develop by itself slowly. Language can change and develop because of the adaptation of development and pattern change, and also system of social life, such as level of education, social, culture, and technology mastery. For more details, here is a video explanation about how language change and evolve.
In the biblical story of the Tower of Babel, all of humanity once spoke a single language until they suddenly split into many groups unable to understand each other. We don't really know if such an original language ever existed, but we do know that the thousands of languages existing today can be traced back to a much smaller number. So how did we end up with so many? In the early days of human migration, the world was much less populated. Groups of people that shared a single language and culture often split into smaller tribes, going separate ways in search of fresh game and fertile land. As they migrated and settled in new places, they became isolated from one another and developed in different ways. Centuries of living in different conditions, eating different food, and encountering different neighbors turned similar dialects with varied pronunciation and vocabulary into radically different languages, continuing to divide as populations grew and spread out further. Like genealogists, modern linguists try to map this process by tracing multiple languages back as far as they can to their common ancestor, or proto-language. A group of all languages related in this way is called a language family, which can contain many branches and subfamilies. So how do we determine whether languages are related in the first place? Similar-sounding words don't tell us much. They could be false cognates or just directly borrowed terms rather than derived from a common root. Grammar and syntax are a more reliable guide, as well as basic vocabulary such as pronouns, numbers, or kinship terms that's less likely to be borrowed. By systematically comparing these features and looking for regular patterns of sound changes and correspondences between languages, linguists can determine relationships, trace specific steps in their evolution, and even reconstruct earlier languages with no written records. Linguistics can even reveal other important historical clues, such as determining the geographic origins and lifestyles of ancient peoples based on which of their words were native and which were borrowed. There are two main problems linguists face when constructing these language family trees. One is that there is no clear way of deciding where the branches at the bottom should end, that is, which dialects should be considered separate languages, or vice versa. Chinese is classified as a single language, but its dialects vary to the point of being mutually unintelligible, while speakers of Spanish and Portuguese can often understand each other. Languages actually spoken by living people do not exist in neatly divided categories, but tend to transition gradually, crossing borders and classifications. Often the difference between languages and dialects is a matter of changing political and national considerations, rather than any linguistic features. This is why the answer to how many languages are there can be anywhere between 3,000 and 8,000 depending on who's counting. The other problem is that the farther we move back in time towards the top of the tree, the less evidence we have about the languages there. The current division of major language families represents the limit at which relationships can be established with reasonable certainty, meaning that languages of different families are presumed not to be related on any level. But this may change. While many proposals for higher-level relationships or superfamilies are speculative, some have been widely accepted, and others are being considered, especially for native languages with small speaker populations that have not been extensively studied. We may never be able to determine how language came about or whether all human languages did in fact have a common ancestor, scattered through the babble of migration. But the next time you hear a foreign language, pay attention. It may not be as foreign as you think.
It is very easy to demonstrate to English speakers that language changes over time. At the point where English spelling became relatively fast by printing, the printers recorded the pronunciation current at the time. For example, in etymological dictionary, nines, which means precise. Another example is reading Shakespeare turns up many words such as high, which means hurry, stilly, which means softly, and around, which means rough, which have disappeared or more tersely changed their meaning. Even since Jane Austen's time, the meaning of words has changes. In her book, Placing Prospect refers to a landscape more often than an expression, and to be sensible means to be aware or perceptive. So now is post-vocalic R sound is spread and starts. Regarded as rural and uneducated action in large areas of England, in many parts of England and Wales, Standard English has lost the pronunciation of R following vowels in words like star and star. It do not occur also in dialect. It is still in progress to be lost some areas due to the regular use. Many American accents are rhotic and under the influence of certain British norms. However, Eastern New England is generally non-erotic. A survey in 1960 found that eroticism was increasing in New York, where it was regarded as prestigious. So, they show that the change of R is the one of the complexity of linguistic variation and change as well as the abruptness. For example, like star and star or law and law. The following is an example of a video on how to pronunciation post-vocalic R sounds.
So like the word air, ear, ire, or, if you want to put them into actual words, tire, fire, bear, here, near, and then tear, care. They're all very similar, but they're just requiring a lot more oral motor strength and coordination. So really it's all about working out your mouth. So after you're able to do all of those, then we're able to start stemming for sounds. And I would start with the ear sound because why? Remember on the first video, I was working on R and I showed you the neck flex, and then we did the E, we did E, pulling the tongue tip up and back. So here we want deer. So my mouth is open, my lips are pursed and out, my tongue is flat for the E sound, and all I have to do is pull that tongue tip up and back. So dear, near, sear, tear. And then you could move on to air, ire, R as in star. And then finally, the last one we're going to do is or as in orange, or for, or before, or door. Why? Because your lips are a little bit more rounded and they are not falling forward, but they are a little bit closed or in a more circular scenario, a more circular location than all of the other vocalic R sounds. So start with working out those muscles of your mouth, and then I hope that your little one can work on their R sounds a little bit easier the next time. Thanks so much for watching. Let me know if you have any questions.
So now is the spread of vernacular forms. A pronunciation is considered prestigious will be imitated, spread through a community, the same as vernacular pronunciation. It is possible for changes to be processed from a variety of starting points in a variety of direction. On Martha Vineyard Island for fishermen, fishhook community has been invited by more immigrant and summer tourists. A 1960 linguistic survey by Labov suggested that this attitude were indicated by the way locals pronounce the A and O sounds in words like light and house. The pronunciation of the vowel become more centralized. Light sounds a bit like light, and house sounds a bit like house. Next is reason for vernacular forms. Express solidarity between those who identified with the island and felt loyalty to its rural values and peaceful lifestyle. So, not all linguistic changes involve adopting new form from outside the speak community, nor do they always involve forms which people are conscious of as prestigious forms. Coyness and coynization. When people who speak different dialect come into contact in monolingual communities. A new dialect or variety emerges. This language change process is called coinization, and the result is a coin, a variety which is the result of dialect context. The coin will typically have some features from each of the contributing dialect, with most features typically coming from the dialect of the largest group of the speakers. That's all for me. Next material will be explained by my friend Dedeh.
My name is Dedeh Auliatul L. In this section, I will look at three common ways in which language change is spread. The first is from group to group, the second is from style to style, and the third is from word to word. Changes from group to group. Language change is the changes in a language move from one group. A group can be any sort of social or work circle. Example can include family, cliques, and crowd affiliation, and etc. The language changes spread through community. Community social factors such as age, status, gender, and origin can affect the language change. Okay, we talk about style to style. Our style is a way of communicating it. It's simple terms. A person's style can be formal and informal or casual. Languages change and vary over time, reconstructed by comparing modern language to determine which traits the language must have which can then change. Uh, so we talk about from word to word. Language change not only spread from one person to other and from one style to other, they will also spread from one word to other. The change is voice, spread through different words one by one. This is called lexical diffusion. So lexical diffusion is the change of how a word is pronounced. Pronounce or sound changes spread through different words one by one. When a sound change begin, all the words with a particular vowel don't change at one in the speech of community. The change of language in a group is often facilitated by gatekeepers. Gatekeepers are people who are members of different groups. Most people are members of many different groups at the same time. There is differences between formal and informal. We can also create lexical change by make changes to our exciting words. There are this kernidable process by which a language adds vocabulary by making changes to exciting words. Process, description, and example. And now, uh, we talk about apparent time and real time in language change. Apparent time construct the way in which sociolinguistics study language variation in different speech communities. The linguists compare speech of people from different age group, differences differences between the speech of older people and younger people are interpreted as indication of changes in progress. An increase in the use of prestigious forms indicate language change. Now, real time. The linguists follow the same group of people and document their change over an extensive period, observing the changes that occur over a period of time. So that why real time is very reliable method considered the social factor affecting the language use. Thank you.
This is a field known as historical linguistics. To understand the historical path a language has taken, we need to know how language change happens in the first place. Language change occurs across all levels of language, including sounds, words, and grammar. At the end of the Old English period of the 1100s, English speakers dropped a lot of suffixes, changing the language's grammar. Then, between 1400 and 1600, English went through a major change in the pronunciation of vowels, known as the Great English Vowel Shift. So while languages can change in multiple ways, they don't always change in all areas at once. As anyone who has misheard a song lyric knows, sometimes we invent words that were never there in the first place. Many newer speakers of a language can mistake one word for something else or reanalyze the language. For example, English apron used to be napron, but people heard a napron as an apron. Now apron is the standard English word. Sometimes innovation happens because people need the language to work better for them. Take English third-person pronouns. Typically incremental, but sometimes there's a situation that's perfect for the creation of an entirely new language. Let's head to the thought bubble to look at one example. In Nicaragua, before the 1970s, there wasn't a deaf community. There were deaf people, sure, but because of a lack of structural support, they stayed at home in their villages and didn't share a common language. Instead, they used various ad hoc gestures to communicate with their hearing family and friends, known as home sign. This changed in 1977, when Nicaragua established the first school for the deaf and brought together deaf children of a wide age range from villages all over the country. The curriculum of the school didn't try to teach kids a signed language. instead focusing on Spanish, lip reading, and some fingerspelling of Spanish words. But students were signing with each other anyway, and they wove together bits of their individual home signs into a richer, more complicated system, something closer to a language. What's interesting is what happened after that. The next generation of deaf children who arrived at the school were exposed to this intermediate communication system and took it a step further. They made it into a full-fledged language, one that had a complex and systematic grammar like any other language. The older generation of children had used pointing sometimes, but the younger generation used pointing more systematically to track repeated mentions of the same person. Pointing acted like a pronoun, according to linguist Anne Senges. Linguists around the world were fascinated. Here was an opportunity to study how a language could evolve from scratch in real time. It seems to take exposure to something linguistic enough, like the intermediate combination of home signs at a young age and as part of a community. Children's brains will sort out that input into language. In this case, the students created what's now known as ISN, Idioma de Señas de Nicaragua, the official Nicaraguan Sign Language. Thanks, Thought Bubble. Nicaraguan Sign Language is a unique example. A more common, observable type of language change occurs because of language contact, which is when languages in the same area influence each other. It's very common for languages to come in contact with other languages. In fact, multilingualism has been the norm in human society. When languages are in contact, there are broadly two possible ways they can influence each other. First, languages can become more like each other. That is, they can converge. Click consonants are a typical feature of languages in the Khoisan family in southern Africa. There are a number of Bantu languages in southwestern Zambia that also have clicks, even though this isn't a typical feature in Bantu languages. The clicks in these Zambian Bantu languages are a result of long-term contact between Khoisan and Bantu languages in Zambia. Or second languages can diverge and become less similar. On the northernmost island of the Pacific nation of Vanuatu, there are 17 different languages. These languages are all part of the Oceanic language family and have lots in common in terms of their grammar, but have all diverged in their vocabulary. In this context, language contact has made speakers willingly diverge as they change words to be more distinct from each other. If two or more languages aren't understandable to each other, we say they're mutually unintelligible. When you put speakers of mutually unintelligible languages together, they'll use elements of their language to create some basic way of communicating.
Hello, I'm Aulia Pertiwi. I want to explain about the reason for language change. There are three reasons for language change, namely social status, gender, and interaction. The first is social status and language change. Snell in 2014 stated that the relationship between language and social status has been a major concern in a field of applied linguistics and sociolinguistics, communication ethnographic, research on language attitude, research on public linguistic debate, and education. So, any social group linguistic change can reach a speech culture, but different types of change are associated with this group. For example, members of group with the most social standing prefer to incorporate change from neighboring group, which have greater status and reputation in their eyes, into a speech culture. Choose in the mind of many people from outside London. Upper-class London speech has prestige. Therefore, middle-class individuals in Norwich who frequently visit London are likely to bring prestigious New London pronunciation or idiom from London to Norwich. For instance, the vowel pronunciation in top and dog has changed from top and dog to RP top and dog in Norwich. Among the leaders in this transition were middle-class speakers and especially women. In spreading less conscious linguistic change, lower-class speakers are more prominent. In particular, lower-class men also use speech by nearby local workers to convey unity, not prejudice. It's not just people who prefer to infonate this way in social underclass, but choose in the Uber classes. Uber class workers are a group with a certain combination of transparency, depth over an alternative type of language, along with a level of density that over a form of opportunity to be general. In Norwich speech, for example, this organization has been introduced to modify the pronunciation of vocal sound such as hell and choose used by people from the surrounding countryside. It sounds like hall. Use the new pronunciation of hell. Depending on if it infiltrates into a upper middle class speech in Norwich. Apart this modification will spread out until they know their low status compared to the RP pronunciation of this vowel. The HRT mentioned above in Australia appear to be spreading among lower socio-economic classes. This intonation is used most commonly by people in lower paid employment, and it's especially arched as a solidarity marker for this category. However, many older speakers of higher status currently regard it in particular as of kind, and so it can remain within the lower social echelon. Alternatively, it may spread from higher social classes into the informal speech of young people, and there be eventually spread upward in this way. The second is gender and language change. Different in woman and man's speech are another source of variation which can result in linguistic change. Sometimes women are the innovator leading a linguistic change, and sometimes men. Women tend to be associated with change toward both prestige and vernacular norms, whereas men more often introduce particular change. Johnson and Mustafa in 2014 state that the woman use of language she frequently mentioned to be principle that women always tend to acquire all new prestige from even from outside their speech commonly besides their elimination for all the form that they think they are denoted. The woman's speech indicates their social aspiration. They use more of the standard question final O pronunciation on word and fewer of the dialect final U pronunciation that the men do. In generalization, in this village, then the woman's speech is closer to the standard of prestige pronunciation of Spanish than is the man. The women have had enough of prison village life. They have seen different lifestyle and been exposed to the standard dialect in their job as cooks for upper class family or as university student. They use more standard from the people outside their village. They gradually this form extend throughout their speech, reflecting not only their social contact but also their values and aspiration. Women in Yusida are leading change toward Castilian Spanish and introducing prestige variant into Yusida speech. In Norwich, in England, Uber working class men are lending a sound change away from the RP standard pronunciation of words like hell toward the vernacular norm of the surrounding rural area hall. This speech norm appeared to express the working class man loyalty to local values on the solidarity of working men as a group. The Norwich women, by contrast, are lending chants toward RP in different vowels in Belfast. The same pattern record. Women are lending chants toward the standard while men are introduce no particular variation. This generalization accounts for difference in women and men, a role in relation to language change in a variety of community. But there are at least two types of expression to this pattern. First, women may also introduce vernacular change into a community, and secondly, there are communities where women are not lending linguistic change in any direction. Finally, the generalization about women lending change toward the standard dialect apply only there where women play some role in public social life. The last is interaction and language change. According to Harya in 2016, a social culture with the culture they live with, people prefer to be recognized as the same. In their everyday interaction, it is very probably that people would mimic and language of their fellow. In providing the mechanism for linguistic change, interaction and contact between individuals is essential, as prefer example have suggested. Harya in 2016 stated that I briefly described in this final section more especially the way in which contact or lack of it has influenced the progression of linguistic change in a variety of cultures. Linguistic change generally progress most slowly in ethnic communities which have little contact with the outside world. The communicative need of the people, their need to be able to interact easily, which has led to a merging of the grammar. On the other hand, each group also wants to be identifiable distance, and this has led to the maintenance indifference at the vocabulary level. One part of linguistic common that this is the linguistic equivalent of having your cake and eating it too. Tracing the progress of linguistic change through the speech of a community is a fascinating exercise. It involves considering the influence of a wide range of social factors. This chapter has obviously drawn on the discussion of social status, gender, and interaction in early chapter. Any of these factors may be relevant in accounting for where a particular change starts or how it spread through a community. The discussion in this chapter has also demonstrated the identifying change in progress involves considering different speech styles as well as the speech of people from different groups. I think that's all from us. Thanks for your attention. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.